And today was day one of Steelers voluntary OTAs, May 27th. We thought this was going to be a big checkpoint for the Aaron Rodgers decision, and he was going to be officially signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers up to this point. At least some people thought that. I mean, May 27th was being thrown out there. You're also getting a lot of June 10th because that's when things start to become mandatory. You also have training camp. But this was one of those days, and it's come and gone, and Aaron Rodgers is still not here. So I know everyone's waiting on pins and needles for what the current players that actually showed up to OTAs had to say about Aaron Rodgers. And I got you guys. Cam Hayward, Freiermuth, Patrick Queen, Mason Rudolph, current QB1 Mason Rudolph. Let me give you their reactions to Aaron Rodgers not being signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers just yet. So in this Mark Caboli tweet, Cam Hayward was asked, do you prefer Aaron Rodgers to be at OTAs if he has intentions on signing with the Steelers? So if Rodgers is going to be here, like, does it matter to Cam Hayward if he's at these voluntary OTAs? After pause, an indifferent Hayward said, I don't care. Who says you can't be better if you aren't here? To each their own. Also had some additional comments where he said there's no need to recruit. It's been more black and white up front. So he was asked about trying to make an extra pitch to Rodgers. Also remarked that you roll with who's here. It's not guessing. You got to get to work. You put in. You can't worry about who's not here. Same way it goes if I was to miss practice. Train keeps going. We'll see what happens. You really just can't worry about what's going on outside of here. That's the way the Steelers have always run the ship. Pat Freiermuth. This is obviously he's been in the league 20 years, seen everything, done everything. He's been there and done that, won a Super Bowl and MVPs. Probably doesn't need OTAs, but it would be cool to work with him and get those reps. But at the end of the day, when he does decide to come, he decides to come. We'll get to work regardless. It will be great if he comes to learn from him, and we'll get to pick his brain. See what happens. How about Mason Rudolph? It's nothing new to me. There's been constant noise. That is the nature of the NFL, so I've been used to that for a long time now. Do nothing but be the best I can and help our team get better this spring. Just control what I can control, throw the ball well, lead the guys, play well when I get the chance. See a theme here? Everyone's giving very professional remarks, handling it very well, from Cam to Mason Rudolph, Freiermuth, and even Patrick Queen. But Patrick Queen, I mean, he gives a little bit of a hint here that, you know, he's kind of eager for Aaron Rodgers to get here sooner rather than later. That, you know, here's the quote. I'm happy with the quarterbacks we have here, but the little fan of me, I grew up a fan of Aaron Rodgers. So he's not trying to knock Mason Rudolph. He's not trying to knock Skylar Thompson, Will Howard. You know, I like these guys, but read between the lines. He's saying, let's be real. That's Aaron Rodgers. As Stephen A. Smith would say, that's a bad man. You know, one of the all-time greats. So if there's a chance to add Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Queen is definitely not going to be opposed. Think we lost connection there for a second? Okay, we're good. Actually, it's good timing with all that because we're done with the players that showed up to OTAs and their reactions to Aaron Rodgers not being there. They handled it well. I mean, it's not a big deal because here's my reaction. Here's my take on the whole situation. A lot of people are going to blow it up out of proportion stuff. Oh, Aaron Rodgers not at OTAs, this and that. Dude, if the Steelers have waited this long for Aaron Rodgers, him not showing up for voluntary OTAs is not going to be the breaking point, is not going to be the difference maker between him being a Steeler for 2025 and him not being a Steeler for 2025. The Steelers wanting him here still and not wanting him here still. Him missing voluntary OTAs is not going to be the difference. Trust me. We've waited this long. And here's the other thing. Here's the other caveat with it. He's not signed yet. He's not even here yet. And you have players that are signed, that are employed by the team, that are big name players, also not showing up to these voluntary OTAs. So it goes to show a little bit, if you're a veteran, you're a star player, big name, you've been around the block, goes to show how much this stuff really matters when it's all said and done. Is it optimal? No. Would I want Aaron Rodgers to be there? Sure. Like Patrick Queen said, like Pat Fryermuth said, would we like Aaron Rodgers to be here? Help build the rapport, build the chemistry. This is going to be a new stop for Rodgers. This is going to be new for everyone. Rodgers' new team, all the players. If there was any continuity from last year with some of these guys, they're going to have to be dealing with a new quarterback. You know what I mean? It's new, it's fresh. So you want to build as much chemistry, as much rapport, all that stuff as possible if you can. But is it the end of the world? No. I hate to use the Favre example because, a lot of people do compare Favre and Rodgers' careers, but I mean, Favre, whenever he did his third team, or I guess technically fourth team because he started his NFL career with the Falcons, but you get my point. He goes from Packers to Jets and then did the whole Vikings thing. When he went to the Vikings and arguably had one of his best seasons of his career at age 40, I don't think he showed up till like middle of training camp, right? It was Favre watch every week throughout that offseason. He told the Jets, "I'm retiring. You can release me." And then get closer and closer to the middle of summer, end of July. I might want to come back. And it's just Favre watch. Didn't Brad Childress and some other Vikings players fly down to Hattiesburg, Mississippi, meet with Favre on his John Deere? Like, it was, in terms of drama and stuff like that, this Rodgers stuff pales in comparison to Brett Favre. But you saw Brett Favre step in, middle of training camp, new team, new teammates, all that stuff, new organization. Did pretty damn good, right? So I don't think these voluntary OTAs are the be all end all. Now, when we get to mandatory minicamp, there's something to be said for that, right? Something to be said for missing that. But again, Rodgers isn't signed here. So he's kind of playing this right. He is having his cake and eating it too by not signing with the Steelers because you can't knock him. Now, we would knock him. I feel like that's the thing. Damned if you do, damned if you don't in this situation. So at least Rodgers is, I think, playing it a little bit safer by not signing. Because imagine if he did sign and is not showing up to these voluntary OTAs. We know what the stories would be. It would be tenfold. It would be times 10 of the critiques on Aaron Rodgers and how he's not a team guy and he's just doing the same thing that he was doing with the Jets, with the Steelers now, and it's going to be a disaster. All that stuff. You know what I mean? At least he's not signed. But there were big name players, TJ Watt, DK Metcalf, Darius Slay, that didn't show up to these voluntary OTAs that are employed by the Steelers, that are currently signed by the Steelers. DK Metcalf, a dude that just signed a mega deal that's going to be a staple for this franchise for the next 5 years. Not at his first voluntary OTAs. Is anyone saying a peep about that? No. Darius Slay didn't sign for as much as DK Metcalf, but another guy that's been around the block. 6, 7-time Pro Bowler, all pro cornerback, Super Bowl champion. Not at voluntary OTAs. No one's saying anything about that. Now, TJ Watt not being there, maybe a little bit of a different story. I don't remember his exact past of being at voluntary OTAs or not, but this year is a little unique because of it being the last year on his current deal and him most likely wanting a contract extension. But from what I can remember, isn't this what happened? What was it, 3 years ago when he was looking for that extension? Missed like the voluntary OTAs, did the hold in during training camp. Minka did the same thing. So guys like that, man. TJ Watt. I mean, Cam Hayward last year, he wasn't at voluntary OTAs. Now, that was a similar situation to what TJ Watt's dealing with this year with the whole contract extension stuff, but he didn't show up and turn back the clock. It was one of Cam Hayward's better years that we've seen. It went right in line with, the last like 3 or 4 where he was making all pros and we were considering him one of the best defensive tackles in the league outside of that one where he got injured in 2023. That was the whole question with him. 2023, man, is Cam taking a step back? And then all last offseason, he's looking for an extension, but he sits out these voluntary OTAs. And that was the conversation for a little bit until he finally did sign. And obviously it didn't affect him. Like he turned back the clock. He got back to his like prime Cam Hayward type of days. And he even mentioned that. That was one of the quotes that I didn't have pulled up. But that's my thoughts on it, man. Like, this ain't a big deal. It really ain't. If the Steelers have waited this long, they're not going to be using voluntary OTAs as the spot to cut the cord on Aaron Rodgers. That's not gonna be the case. I told you where the breaking point is. For me, probably it's somewhere in training camp and these preseason games, and it depends on how Mason Rudolph looks, and it depends on how the team is responding to Mason. Because if Mason is killing it, the team's really responding to him. They view him as the leader. They feel like he's in the trenches with us. He's out here working with us. I don't want a guy that's just going to show up halfway through and feel like the red carpet's going to be ruled out for him. You know what? I prefer this Mason approach. Him being here, him being with his teammates, just working hard, keeping the noise levels low, no drama, anything like that. If the Steelers players are acting like that and Mason's playing good, there's going to be a breaking point where the Steelers just got to say it's better for us to go with Mason than having Aaron Rodgers come into training camp, middle of these preseason games, cold like that, middle of August, whatever it is. I don't know what that line is. Tomlin, Khan, coaching staff, they're going to have to judge that for themselves behind the scenes. But I think that's what it is. I think that's where the breaking point is. So this isn't really that big of a deal to me at all, actually. Yeah, at all. You have current players that are missing the OTAs. Current big name players missing the OTAs. You have a guy that's not even signed yet missing the voluntary OTAs. And it's a guy that kind of knows what he's doing on a football field where yeah, he could probably skip these voluntary OTs. And Cam Hayward even said, who's to say? Who's to say you can't get better if you aren't here? To each his own. And I think I even heard that from Oates in the past with some of these offseason workouts and programs and stuff. A lot of times, guys like TJ Watt, a guy like Darius Slay, a guy like DK Metcalf, they're working out harder on their own. They're gaining more from their personal trainer, their own personal system, whatever they're doing on their own. They're actually getting better that way as opposed to joining up, meeting with the Steelers. Now, there is something to be said, again, for the camaraderie, the building of team chemistry, the building rapport. Like, that can't be replaced. But at the same time, it's what you do on the field. It's how you show up on Sundays. It's how you work whenever things are mandatory, whenever you do got to be here, that I think matters a little bit more at the end of the day. All right. What else do I want to talk about here? I do have a couple separate topics or multiple different topics, multiple ways we could go about this. I think we're going to go with Kirk Cousins, actually, because that name has been brought up a lot recently over the last 3 or 4 days in media circles. And Jeremy Fowler, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, AFC North reporter, is one of those guys that brought up Cousins on SportsCenter as a name that has been on the Steelers' radar and that he feels like the team could trade for him if Rodgers ultimately doesn't sign here. The full quote says, Rodgers is plan A. Kirk Cousins could be a viable plan B. After making some calls today, I do believe he's been on their radar. I hope those people that were talking to Jeremy Fowler are just lying to him, flat out lying to him to build leverage. Whatever people in the Steelers organization are talking about Kirk Cousins being on their radar, I hope they're just flat out lying to him so they could have some leverage and maybe that would entice Rodgers to sign a little bit sooner. That's my hope. I hope there's not any serious conversations about Kirk Cousins that's going on between Tomlin and Khan and Rooney. So if something were to fall through with Rodgers, certainly they could reconvene, call Atlanta, see if they could shake something out. But right now, Rodgers is the guy. So nothing we don't know. Even with him not showing up to these OTAs, there's nothing that says he's not going to be here. So that is the plan A. That is still the most likely scenario that's going to be playing out here. But what about Kirk Cousins? Should the Steelers pursue him if things go south with Rodgers, he ultimately retires? Maybe he just never gives a decision and is just waiting in no man's land throughout the rest of this offseason and wants to wait to see how things shake out in the regular season, if any quarterback gets hurt, anything like that. Should we pivot to Kirk Cousins? You guys know my answer. I just felt like I had to respond to this because the Kirk Cousins buzz has been heating up recently. and to my dismay. No, we should not be going for Kirk Cousins. Absolutely not. He's not better than Mason Rudolph right now for this team. He's had a better career. I'll give him that. He's had some decent seasons, made some Pro Bowl. I'll give him credit, man. I'll give him credit. Like, he's made bank. He's pulled off a hell of an NFL career for being a 4th-round pick, being a consistent starter year in, year out. I'm giving him that credit. But let's look at how he finished last year with the Falcons. Got benched for a rookie, even with them being still in the playoff hunt. His play got that bad where they're like, you know what? We got to try Michael Penix out. He actually gives us the best chance to win rest of this regular season and potentially, if we get into the playoffs, throughout the playoffs. And that was on full display once they benched Kirk Cousins. Michael Penix was the better quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. His last 5 games, he had 1 touchdown and 9 interceptions. QBR for last year was at 50. So this is just yet another quarterback that has been linked to the Steelers, that has a name, that Mason Rudolph actually had a better QBR than last year. Talked about Russell Wilson, talked about Justin Fields, even Aaron Rodgers. I think Rodgers' QBR was like in the 40s. I think it was less than 50. And now Kirk Cousins. Mason Rudolph had a better QBR than all of those guys. Mason Rudolph is more in his prime than 3 out of those 4. Justin Fields, the one, he's what, 26 or something like that. But Kirk Cousins, coming off the Achilles, he's 37, 38. We know Rodgers' story. Russell Wilson, he's getting up there in age. He looked limited as last season went on. Now, Justin Fields, the conversation with him was, the uncertainty. Is he going to fully develop? There's, some question marks there. But, like, man, all these guys that we're talking about, Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. That's the thing. You take the chance on Aaron Rodgers, even though his QBR was worse than Mason and had a little bit of a rough season with the Jets last year. Still 28 touchdowns, 11 picks. We know the whole spiel with him. And it's Aaron Rodgers. Like, you take that chance, you take that swing. Kirk Cousins has never been able to hold a candle to Aaron Rodgers throughout the course of his career. You can even say the same thing in a way, like if you're comparing Kirk Cousins and Russell Wilson, I don't think Kirk's really on Russell Wilson's level either. Russell Wilson, Super Bowl champion, 10-time Pro Bowler, even though he shouldn't have made the Pro Bowl last year. So it's like we passed on Russell Wilson. We passed on Justin Fields, who, again, that could be up for debate too. I spent a good portion of last episode talking about Mason Rudolph for Justin Fields and why I feel like the Steelers, they could have made a right decision there by paying Mason Rudolph less. Both guys have upside. Justin Fields, obviously more talent, but, over a 17-game sample coming up, who's to say Mason Rudolph doesn't have the better year than Justin Fields? I think that is a fair question to ask, or a fair just contemplation to have. But we're talking about Kirk Cousins now. Russell Wilson's not on the table anymore. Obviously, Justin Fields ain't on the table. Mason Rudolph still had a higher QBR than those two. Rodgers, we'll see with him. Looks like he's signing. But if he doesn't sign, that's where the conversation is here. This is where the real debate is here. Rodgers ain't here. Mason Rudolph is. Kirk Cousins available for trade with the Falcons. Do we go get Kirk Cousins? No. Why are we doing that? You're wasting time. We're passing on Russell Wilson, a guy that actually would have had continuity here and is better than Kirk Cousins. Actually had a better season last year than Kirk Cousins, although both of them had a pretty bad demise for those last 5 weeks that they were the starter. You passed on Russ. You passed on Justin Fields, who, again, you also have continuity with, who has more upside than Kirk Cousins. Passed on those two. Like, what are we doing here? Like, if you go get Kirk Cousins, I felt like you're wasting your time with Russell Wilson. So why are you going to trade up an asset and go get Kirk Cousins and potentially take on that disaster of a contract that he is going on right now? I'm sure you could talk with the Falcons, get it split up certain ways, but you got to give up something because it looks like the Falcons, according to a bunch of reports, are setting a hefty price tag for Kirk Cousins. Why would you do that? At least with Mason, you got him on the books, $3.5, $4 million. And There's a strong argument he's better than Kirk Cousins right now already and has more upside. Definitely stronger arm, more mobile than Kirk Cousins. So what are we talking about here? It's just that Kirk Cousins has put together a good career, right? He's got numbers, he's got fantasy stats, but when push comes to shove, the dude has one playoff one. And right now, it looks like he's at the worst point he's ever been at his career, coming off the Achilles injury, getting worse last year, 18 touchdowns, 16 picks, 1 touchdown, 9 picks for the last 5 games of the season, bench for Michael Penix. Like, what are we doing? You're just wasting your time. You're trying to give the fans hope. You're trying to give Steeler players hope by bringing in Kirk Cousins because of the name, but there's no real hope there. There's never been at really any point in his career. He'll get you good enough in his prime to be relevant, to be sniffing the playoffs, to be around the mix. But he's never going to be good enough to go toe-to-toe with franchise quarterbacks, to go up against elite defenses in the playoffs in those type of settings. He hasn't been able to prove it when he's been at his best. And now he's at the worst point of his career coming off of last year. So what? Yeah, it'd be stupid. You're just wasting time. At least with Mason, there's an upside. There's a potential that, you know what? We haven't seen a full sample from him. The talent's there. Let's see. Let's see. He went on that crazy run at the end of 2023 and was playing like a top 10 quarterback. Could we see that for 17 games? Didn't look like the moment was too big for him in the wild card playoff game against the Bills in 2023. Got us within 1 score in the fourth quarter, showed some mental fortitude there. Kirk Cousins, there's no let's see. It's we know. We know. Lost season automatically. And lost season from the standpoint of, 8 and 9, 9 and 8, maybe 10. I don't even know. I don't even think 10 and 7 with Kirk Cousins. It's lost season to where you're drafting outside of the top 10. You're picking 14 or 15, and you got no new information. Mason Rudolph, you could actually find something out. You get some new information. Oh, could he be the guy? Could he have like a second stint to his career, like a Geno Smith, a Baker Mayfield, a Sam Darnold? Could he be one of those guys? The talent's there. Why not Mason? So, yeah, I think Kirk Cousins, you're wasting your time. And I see why the Falcons do, even though I am kind of ripping on him right now. I see why the Falcons have the hefty price tag on him. They're not eager to move off him right now because injuries happen throughout the course of a regular season. And if a starting quarterback gets injured, all of a sudden Kirk Cousins' price tag goes up a ton, especially if it's a contender. So instead of maybe, I don't know what a fair price for Kirk Cousins would be right now. No clue. But if the Falcons are saying that fair price is not what we're looking for even higher, and they're willing to wait things out, see how the regular season plays out, that high price might even go up to, I don't know, maybe a 3rd-round pick. Who knows? Who knows how desperate a team could be middle of the regular season. If you got a winning record, you feel like you got a chance for the playoffs. Who knows? But I don't blame the Falcons for having, because it's probably better for you just to have Kirk Cousins on your roster as a backup option to Penix, help a mentor, whatever. And if Penix goes down, you still got Kirk. Probably still better to keep him there than giving him up for like a 6th-round pick. But that's probably what a fair asking price would be for Kirk Cousins, given you were going to have to take on a portion of that contract, all that stuff. But for the Steelers, Kirk Cousins, just hell no, please no. Just no. Go with Mason. It's Rodgers or Mason at this point. That's it. No other options. You passed on the other options that may have been somewhat legitimate earlier this offseason. A Stafford trade. I've talked about Fields, but, even the Russ stuff, right? We didn't know exactly what way the Steelers were going, but Russell Wilson was obviously still on the Steelers' radar to a degree, but we let him walk. We let him go visit the Browns, let him visit the Giants. We clearly didn't want him the way that a lot of the reporters were talking about. Like they thought it was still up in the air, or at least still a conversation that the Steelers would bring Russ back. Clearly not. But yeah, we passed on all those options, which are better options than trading for a Kirk Cousins, to say the least. So I think you would just be going backwards. You'd be sending big-time mixed signals by trading for Kirk Cousins. Big time. But that's it for today's show. Hope you guys enjoyed. I will be back tomorrow, 6 p.m. Stay chilling, and here we go, Steelers. Peace.